I guess on the last call, we pretty much talked about this idea of like a program to get it moving kind of at a quicker and probably a better quality pace than kind of trying to like crowd fund or crowdsource all of this without anybody like being held accountable. And so we did decide to make that executive decision, and we ended up appointing Garrett the Parrot, Beachy. I'm not sure how to say that, and then Mike Beachy, and then Stubbs. And so we agreed to do that. So I know we went back to you guys and pretty much said, okay, well, ball's in your court to kind of come up with what you guys think like the scope is and what the deliverables are. And I know you guys did put that together for us, which is awesome. So thank you for that. I guess it all makes sense. I think we have a couple questions. I don't know, Hero, if you want to kind of start with some of your questions, or if you want me to. It's kind of the floor is open here.
Yeah, go for it, man. I think that you and I have pretty similar questions anyway, so why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, so I went through the whole thing and it looks really good. I think the only thing that wasn't like really that clear was I guess are you guys planning on like actually carrying out cohort zero, or is this really like just like you're pretty much going to put the framework together, get the applicants selected, and then kind of like walk away and then let the community kind of run the cohort zero? Or what are you guys envisioning with kind of like actually running it?
So
Maybe.
yeah, that's
What were you expecting? I guess would be my question. Were you expecting that that was included in what we were talking about before? Um, that wasn't my impression, but I'd like to hear everyone else's feelings.
And also, if you could just expand on what you mean by run it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to go. So like, yeah, in my mind that was true. Like it was sort of like you guys create the onboarding process, see cohort zero through. I mean, meaning however long this lasts. Say it lasts about 6 weeks is what we're talking about. Meaning that any kind of administrative work that happens during that time, you guys would kind of be responsible for. Now, like, I'm not saying like run a mentorship program or anything like that, but just setting up AMAs, checking in with the applicants, or not the applicants, the grantees at that point, and then just being responsive to whatever may need outside of what people that would be helping you, like the grants working group, which at this point looks like Live Fast, CB, and me. Although I think once we have a cohort on board, like more people are going to get excited pretty quick, right? And then hopefully a bunch of people have mentor tags and this and that. But yeah, in my mind, it was like build the framework, see it, do the administrative work during cohort zero, and then kind of do a debrief. And then once cohort is finished, that's that. And then we figure out what to do to onboard cohort one, but that's not part of this initial kind of framework. So it seems like there was some miscommunication there. I think that C and I both thought that was true, but you guys didn't. And so I don't know if that's an expectation gap or what it was. CB?
Yeah, I agree with Hero. Like, I don't think anyone's asking that you guys are going to be like responsible for like the success or failure of the actual like uh, cohortees or whatever you want to call them. I think it's more like he said, like more like administrative. So like just helping to assist, like set up kind of like what I guess our expectations are from the cohort, participants. Basically, like do we do like an AMA with them at some point? Like, when does that happen, I guess, and how does that happen, sort of a thing. And then basically like I was kind of one of the roles would basically be like you guys kind of facilitating just maybe the scheduling of that. Um Obviously don't think running of it, maybe not. Maybe we have other people that step up that actually want to like run like an AMA like that, but more kind of what we want these people to do and like what kind of, because like I'm kind of thinking about it like as these people go through this experience, there's going to be a lot of like really interesting things that we can like extract from that. And I guess I'm trying to think about like what what kind of checkpoints should we have to try to extract that information from them. We could do like Twitter space interviews with them, either like before and after. We do like podcast stuff. We're talking about spinning up like a newsletter. So there's potential situations there to like do some newsletters and stuff. And again, I'm not talking about like you guys maybe carrying out those specific things, but maybe it'd be nice if we've identified together kind of what those checkpoints look like and who's responsible for, I guess, scheduling stuff like that and kind of getting it in the cards. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure. Um, I know when you first reached out to me, as I kind of was like, okay, what do you want? Um, and maybe I was just misunderstanding because the impression that I got was run it up, like get the framework, set the framework, um, make sure that we have everything in place so that we can run a cohort. Um, and then, kind of, since so much of this stuff could be really cool, but like, newsletter and things like that, let the community kind of decide which ones we really want to do, um, rather than trying to like decide all of that before we have the people to do it. Um, and so with that kind of impression that I'd gotten is kind of why we went down like up until the cohort was decided. Um, I'm not sure if you had a similar conversation at Echo BC, which is why like, I think it's something else, but I think that's why we went down that path.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. I think we're all learning as we go. So, and I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Maybe, maybe it is too early to start thinking about some of those things. Maybe, I don't know, maybe naturally once we start getting a cohort, ready to go and we actually have applicants, maybe we're going to be able to think about these things better on the fly. Cause I mean, I'm assuming that you guys aren't just going to walk away after the cohort selected. I mean, I'm assuming like you guys probably have some sort of interest to kind of see, okay, like we put this baby together. Let's watch it walk. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and so maybe, I don't know here. I mean, what do you think? I mean, maybe these are type of conversations that we have as we're like going through the cohort. Like we kind of make these decisions kind of weekly. Like, okay, maybe it is time for like an AMA, and then we actively schedule it kind of in the moment, sort of a thing, rather than try to arbitrarily put it together without really having any idea.
Could I
Honestly,
clarify something?
no, Mike, go for it.
I think my impression was that we will be putting together the framework of, say, the scheduling for AMAs, when that should take place, and sort of we're going to put together the framework for how cohort zero will progress. But my idea was that our responsibilities extended into this, what we discussed as a 5 to 6 week period of preparing to launch cohort zero. So if our responsibilities is to both prepare the framework to launch cohort zero and see cohort zero through its maturity, that would be an additional 6 weeks. We'd be talking about a 12-week period responsibility, which, in our meeting, when we did some back of the envelope math, I clearly remember talking about a 5 to 6 week period, which is like the time that we need to prepare the framework and receive applications. And then the point at which we decide on who those grantees are, that's the end of that period. And then that 6 week period of cohort zero then begins. So the outline for how cohort zero will flow will have already been defined by us, but defining like the responsibility of who's going to drive that wasn't a part of the responsibilities I imagined for this particular proposal.
I will say that I also remember that 5 to 6 week conversation, and talking about like, well, what does this remuneration look like over that time period. So I plus one what you're saying, Michael. I also yeah, maybe so that was maybe a disconnect in my head, right? Or because I do remember us talking about that, and I don't recall any need for any further kind of agreement around it. I mean, what's the bottom line, guys? Right? Is that you pay to be divided by three, essentially two, come up with a framework, execute it, and then get it right to the point where we're onboarding. I mean, so that's to clarify that one for me too. Like, I mean, do you see that this time period ends, I mean, the day that the three grantees are selected?
So that's what we'd put for the proposal.
Right.
Um, and I so to kind of touch on the topic that Steve brought up, like, do we just hope that people take over? I mean, that's the reason why we're here right now, is because hoping that people step up and put up like real meaningful time to see these things through. It's not happening and working, which is why we needed to appoint people. So, that is where I think we need to kind of think about this for, at least this meeting. But do we have the framework and then, see if we want to bring other people in? Because obviously we're going to be doing this whole thing, hopefully with a lot of input from everybody else to make sure that everybody is on board and agrees with it. I'd be disappointed if we didn't have a lot of other people throwing in ideas and helping out. And I think that the only reason we wouldn't say that us three are going all the way through the 12-week period is so that we can have, we can say that we want somebody else, or we want to add other people that kind of have at least a more official role on the project. And if we just assign us for the 12-week period, it doesn't have a good spot for that unless we kind of craft that in right now.
Yeah, I mean some of my questions, I guess, and maybe some of our concerns might be answered in the part where you guys have like a bullet point that says program framework, and then it says like grantee expectations slash deliverables, process flow, timelines, deliverables, etc., Dow point community involvement. And I guess I mean, if, like, for instance, in the grantee expectations and deliverables, like, for instance, I don't know what the final framework will look like. Obviously, once you guys get started, it'll start being born. But if in that framework there are like kind of checkpoints for some of the things we've talked about, then I guess that was, I guess, some of my biggest concern is like, are we going to build in that stuff into the initial framework? And I think we should, because we should give obviously the grantees like some expectation of like what they should be doing too, right? We don't want to like bring it on somebody and say, hey, yeah, we want to do like a video interview, and they're like, oh no, I absolutely like won't talk on camera, you know what I mean, or I won't talk at all, or anything. And then it's like, well, what the heck, um I'm just
Yeah,
kind
and
of ball here.
so the reason we didn't like go into the details of that is, in the initial proposal that went through Snapshot, it's specified that the grantees have to do something like a podcast, and so we didn't want to try and get like very very specific for the things that we would end up doing, since we know that's going to kind of be iterative for the next couple of weeks, so we're going to have a lot of ideas. And so we didn't want to put in this proposal it will be a podcast or YouTube thing, or whatever, without having had time to like work with everyone. I don't know what requirement would be. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's I understand totally. It's hard to put it's hard to like specify some of these things without kind of going through it one time. And
In
yeah,
the in the
because we can always plan for it.
sample application, I put, if you are awarded the grant, you will be given your own personal channel in the Dowpunks Discord server as a member of Cohort 0, where you can receive guidance from the team and will have access to the vast knowledge and wisdom of the Dowpunks community To help you along your journey to full-time DAO, grantees will be asked to provide updates on their progress through community AMAs and to share their story on the up-and-coming DAO Punks podcast. Are you up for that? Selections of LFG or nah, I don't really want to put the effort into all of that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That sounds good. I mean, here, what are you thinking? I mean, it sounds like some of the concerns we had are going to be addressed. I guess the real question here is really, it's like once the cohort starts, it is kind of going to be like kind of in my, I guess in my eyes right now, it is kind of going to be like an open source sort of involvement where people can kind of jump in and help as needed. And I mean, I have no problem like championing stuff, make sure stuff happens during cohort 0 while we're learning and figuring it out. I mean, like I don't think there's ever going to be a situation where the ball's just dropped completely.
No,
But that's what I'm.
no, like not at all. I'm the same way, and of course, there's more of us too, right? And so, I mean, quite frankly, I never imagined that we'd be in a place where we get to, give some money to Stubbs and to Maiko and to Garrett to put the effort in to get, the beginning part of this framework, or really, I should say, the entire framework that will make the grants program run into the future together, right, in a really thoughtful, focused way. So, we're already pretty far ahead of what perhaps I could have hoped for. I mean, I did naively perhaps imagine that this could be done in a different setting, like, I mean, but I don't think it'd be done as quickly, really, and I don't think it'd be done as well. And it's really been a change in my own thinking in the last like 6 weeks. Going, shit, there is some real value in paying people in a centralized fashion to get some work done, and
Yeah,
again,
who are you and what have you done with Hero?
well, I mean, I just have seen like I know what you mean, but I've seen so I've seen sentiment shift in DAOs since I've been a part of them for the past 5 months, right? And I don't know if it's in a response to the market going down or people getting tired or what, right? But across Bankless too, like people are just less motivated to get shit done and to work hard, period. And more people are openly talking about financial strain and stress, and needing to find a way to get at least some dollars. So yeah, I think Stubbs, it's just by being a different human, being a little bit empathic. The group model narration up front than I would have imagined, and that coordinate's not going to cut it, right? And so the wonderful thing is you get to mind, and if you're dogmatic about shit, well then you're you're toast, So for me, my thinking just changed, and I realized like I was wrong on certain things, and lucky me for being wrong and having an open mind to understand that. So we're already ahead of the game, guys. The fact that we get to do this work and we're going to get a dope product out of it. And I think that just because I know you three so well, that I'm not concerned about you bailing on day one. And if you did bail, and that affected the framework negatively, then it would tell me the framework's not that good. And I don't think that'll be the case. I think you're going to be thoughtful. I think you're going to build a really good onboarding process. And that even if the three of you disappeared on day one, it would still run, right? So like I have no interest in like, fighting about money, not that we're doing that, or like saying, God, I want more work for this amount of ETH or this or that. I want to, guarantee that you're going to be there until the end. What I really want is just a super dope onboarding product and experience for cohort 0. And I have faith that you three can do that. And so for me, like, we're good, dude. Let's fire this baby up, and then we'll get the community involved, and we'll see cohort 0 through, and then we'll figure out what cohort 1 looks like. So I think that's kind of where I'm at. So Stubbs, I mean, long story short, brother, I've come around to your way of thinking. These last 6, then I was in December. So I mean, thank you for your education.
I just love we're all able to have these conversations and learn, because I mean, I think all of us have grown a lot. Because until the last 6 months, year, all this stuff was theory, and so it's like it's theory and reality are very different. Sometimes a little bit different, sometimes very different, and So it's fun to kind of make fun of us all for how we change, and I'd be terrified if our thought processes didn't change. That'd be bad.
That would be bad. Yeah, totally. And so yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I'm disillusioned on DAOs, or I still don't think they're the next, way we coordinate humanity going forward long term. I just think that shit, honestly, people need money, and that's just true. So that's okay. We should be free to talk about that all we want, and not be ashamed of it.
Yeah, and honestly, I think
And I really just,
go ahead.
you can go, Micah.
Oh, well, I think that just the nature of our treasury is a little bit unique. Like we touched on this a little bit in previous meetings, but like we don't have our own native like economic governance token. We use our NFTs as our governance token, and I think a lot of projects would have withheld a certain portion of the mint for their treasury, and like would have a whole bunch of token to offer as compensation for contributors, but we're like using the ETH that we raised for our mission, and now we're looking at that and it's like, well, we need this for our mission for the grants. And so we don't want to use it for operations, but the reality is like we need an operations treasury and we need to, so we can get shit done and we can build. And so I don't know, getting that like idea straightened out, I think is going to be really helpful.
Absolutely. And I think there's more cash flow opportunity. I really truly that we can that we can actually do this in a meaningful way, then I think there'll be other opportunities to onboard more cash flow into the program. But it's kind of like the saying, like, money presents itself to those who are ready, and we're not ready. So I mean, if we got handed $1 million today, so we gotta kind of just
And now they're going to tap us and say, hey, can you do this? Can you give me one of these grantees? I'll pay you for it. Right. And it kind of becomes a self-funding mechanism. I think, long term, might be wrong, but I don't think so. There's no shortage of DAOs who have nice fat treasuries who need, thoughtful, willing, motivated applicants to go and fill those positions.
yeah. What's cool too is we actually almost have the same amount of ETH balance as Bankless DAO, and that they're much bigger than us, and a lot more people contributing. So I mean, we do have a decent little treasury for the small group of participants that are actively like going to be deploying it. So it is pretty cool. It's cool to be a part of.
It's awesome. Like, think about this. Think about what it would take to squeeze, like one ETH out of Bankless DAO for a proposal. you know, so yeah, it's super dope, right? And it's a worthy allocation. And all of Bankless DAO's ETH came from DAO Punks anyway, but that's a different story. Okay, so moving on. Very nice.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
so
there's
guys,
I think
what do
there's
you
tons of
need?
potential. Like I'm super confident about our future potential, and I think like I agree. As soon as we actually have a framework and we run our first cohort, like it's gonna blow up. I think we're gonna get a lot of attention, and if we have a little bit of our shit together by the time that happens, like good things are gonna come, and like there's opportunity to do, to mint our own native token in the future, and airdrop that as, for contributors as well, which is kind of exciting.
Okay, so
Yeah,
here's my question to you guys. So in my mind, the 2.25 ETH is probably it's like in the middle of too much if we're just giving you a framework, but depending on how robust of a program we want to run and what we want to look like, it's not very much over 12 weeks, depending on what we decide. So if we were saying it's just going to picking the applicants, and then we went through a new process of like, who do we really want to run it? How much is it worth running the program, especially if we have weekly AMAs and things like that. Where if we said for sure this is just to picking the people, how far below your expectations would it be?
I guess it would just depend what the framework looks like. 'Cause like again, there's that one section in there that does talk about like deliverables of the grantee, right? The grantee expectations slash deliverables, the process flow, timelines, deliverables, etc. I mean, if you guys have like a well put together framework that really kind of clearly defines some expectations and deliverables, then it might be an easy situation where like me or Hero or Sinjin kind of carries out some of those things and it's kind of all already clear.
For sure.
And then hopefully again the community steps up and helps like mentor and stuff inside of these channels and stuff like that. And so I guess it wouldn't fall short as long as the kind of that section is kind of answered to some degree. Then I guess it wouldn't, But if that section was out completely, then I would say it would be like we'd be missing a big piece.
Agreed. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, and that's a great point. So I mean, the way that I see this proposal, right, and the whole onboarding cohort zero is really also understanding, what those 6 weeks look like while they're here. Now, I'm not saying that I think it encompasses you guys running those 6 weeks, but I would want to know, okay, here are the AMAs, here's how we're going to do coordinate. Here are these other obligations that we want these people to have, whether that's going to be everybody's on a podcast, they're doing newsletter interviews, if that's fired up by then. So I would want to know like what the expectations are from the community pretty granularly for those 6 weeks, but I wouldn't expect you guys to run it. I think that that's one of the beauties, right, of the working group model is you'd have people who are doing that work along with you. And of course, like CB and I are always gonna, and Sinjin as well, right? They're always gonna step up to help do that stuff. But I expect other people to too. Now I don't want to bank on it, right? But so for me, like, yeah, if you guys just like did the cohort done and you didn't provide any guidance about what happens while they're actually here, I think it falls short. If you provide that guidance but don't run it, like I'm totally good with that.
Because I know that, and it obviously wasn't clear in there. What we will provide is going to be like a playbook, a handbook that you can hand it to somebody and they'll run the program, and they know that
Right.
we're using Coordinate rather than whatever, and all of that. I at least it should be somebody that's just like there to send out a link in the announcements. Otherwise, I don't think that the DAO will really get what they want out of it. I don't think the participants will get what they want out of it. It would be very hard to market it afterwards. So I kind of am banking on we do need to have community involvement once this program is up and running, or we need a commitment that we're saying, hey, we've got to have compensation for people because it's if we don't have something robust that takes more than just an hour here and there, then I don't think we're providing much. And giving somebody 1 ETH for 6 weeks, if we don't have like some media and some guidance and some activities, it's like we're not going to raise any more money, and 1 ETH isn't that much, so it's just kind of these blind blank checks. So I think that if say we just handed you something, and kind of the reason that we need to decide on whether this is the 12-week program or a 6-week program is, the second tranche is once it's complete. And if it's 12 weeks and we get zero, not zero, but we don't get very much involvement from the community, then I know, at least me personally, I'd be like, well, I'm going to make this succeed. It's a program that I helped build. Um, and I know that it would be one of those things where it's like, oh man, I'll just take on everything. Whereas, say it was the 6 weeks, get the framework set up and everything, I may still be the one that's mostly running it, but now it's not like, oh, the community doesn't say, oh, those three people were picked, they were paid, and I don't need to get involved with it until there's a new, selection of people and all that. So, I mean, I do think it's very important that we decide whether it's or 12 weeks, and 12 weeks. I think that we kind of change what success looks like potentially. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess the only hard part for me is it's almost like putting the cart before the horse, because it's like without kind of a clear like vision of what it looks like. I guess it's hard to like figure out what is the needed like level of activity and stuff like that. And like you said, like there needs to be some meat in the program to make it worthwhile, so it's not just like throwing money into the wind and watching it blow away. So I guess I'd be interested to see like maybe what you guys have in mind, and then maybe we just have to revisit this conversation once we kind of have a better idea of like what this program actually looks like. Um, I mean, does that make sense?
So yes, it's funny because you're like, um, a lot of the details are the things that we need to put good time into, and that's what we'd be working on for the 6 weeks, is getting those details that you're kind of asking for. Um, so again, it's kind of the what exactly do we want? Well, we don't know exactly what we want from the community and exactly how to do it. And if we did know all those answers, that's a lot of what we don't have and that we haven't been able to get because nobody's been able to put the time in for it.
All
Well,
right.
so am I reading the subtext of all this correctly though? Like, well, let me ask two questions. Like, one, when you guys think about building this framework and playbook, etc., I mean, do you imagine fleshing out what happens during the 6 weeks that cohort zero is here?
Yes, yeah.
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 I mean,
And then the
it's
question would
going on
be,
now.
how who manages that? How are they compensated? And if it's you guys, is this really make more sense to talk about what a 12-week compensation schedule looks like?
At least for me, that's
Maybe.
exactly kind of what I'm trying to get at.
And
Is
what I'm trying to do, like, is like put money on like front and center, right? We had this conversation. Frank America has been very helpful in my life, and just in my life in DAOs, and saying, "Fuck, if this is what we need to talk about to move the ball around, like let's talk about it." Like, there's enough shame about money and everything else, but like that, and that's why I'm asking the question point blank, right? So is that sounds like what we're trying to talk about, but not quite talking about it, right? And so Stubbs, you're saying yes, that's the question I'm asking, which is
yeah,
a
yeah,
totally valid question, dude.
yep. Those are
Yeah,
the
I mean, and
both of those.
it's also just like I got to look at my life and be like, okay, am I going to commit 12 weeks to being
Right.
available to this? Now it's a different question, right? As far as,
Well,
it might change whether or not some of us want to do this role, whether it was for the amount of money or whether we just you know, need to look at that in our lives. But I think another thing about it is that it's a fundamentally different role. So like we are proposing to build out a framework, and that's a different mindset from someone else who wants to run the operation. Like somebody who wants to just be handed a playbook and then be like a curator and a kind of a coordinator and a community active person, more of a they would be more of a relations kind of a person than a builder. Like any one of the three of us might be both of those kinds of people, but like it might be just like a different role altogether, and you might want a permanent role, and it might only need to be one person. You might not need to pay a group of three people to run cohort zero after we've built the framework and handed off the playbook. That might just need to be one person. And I'm all about deciding on that like as far ahead of time as possible, because that's great. And it could be the three of us, it could be one of us, it could be somebody else completely. And I'm sure there's plenty of other people who would love the opportunity to get paid to like contribute to DAO Punks. So like it could be a different person who sort of sees the cohort zero through. It could be the three of us. We could all three just commit to a 12-week instead of a 6-week. But in my mind, yeah, it's just kind of like a fundamentally different role.
Yeah, I understand, and I think that I think everything helps here. It helps me understand because I think it did answer some of my concerns initially. Like you guys are basically coming up with like a playbook, right? And that's gonna like envision like what the cohort, what's going to entail the cohort zero,
Yeah,
like
basically,
obviously all the,
yeah, whoever is running cohort zero isn't going to have to invent anything. Like they're not going to
yeah,
have to
okay,
come up with
so
any, they're not going to have to screen any hard decisions and figure out what to do for what, because it's all going to be laid out. And they're just going to kind of need to point people to the right place and check up on people and be like, make sure that they're like, hey, when can we schedule you for the podcast? And there's going to need to be somebody coordinating that, right? But they're not going to need to like invent the process. We're going to be doing that for them ahead of time.
yeah,
But
okay,
you
that
guys
sounds
are
good.
running. You guys aren't running the screening though. I mean, because I saw the language in the proposal about a screening committee, right? Or that maybe that was in Garrett's response. Yeah, Garrett's response.
That was my question. I was just waiting for you guys to, yeah, because this is an important piece too. But that's exactly what I still wanted to at least get your opinion on, if there is a clear distinction, because I think that is a fairly big chunk of work, depending on how many applicants we get to go through all those and, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, thank you, Hero.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, this bleeds into it, right? And that's kind of on the gray edge of where the playbook ends and sort of onboarding begins. And so I guess maybe I naively thought that, or ignorantly thought that, like you guys would like under your assumptions that your work was done, before this conversation. Your work was done once cohort zero was selected and ready to go, so fully onboarded. But I don't think that's what you think, right? And this is not a judgment statement. I think we're just trying to figure out where we are in each other's heads.
In my mind, like the grant screening represents a bulk of the labor that we're going to have to be doing that kind of validates the remuneration, which is why it's worth the remuneration for like this 6-week period, because that's part of the bulk of the labor is like screening those applications. So in my mind, yes, like that would be a part of our responsibilities, and it's in there, but
Okay.
it's not really detailed because we haven't worked out the details yet. But
Yeah, no, that's all good. I was just a little unclear. Stubbs and Garrett, is that your understanding as well?
Yeah, so it's funny because um, you could really argue that if we're not running the cohort, then we shouldn't be selecting the people who are going through the cohort.
Hence the
Um,
gray edge. Yeah.
yeah, and then also there's the big discussion of exactly how we do the screening, because I'm very much under the opinion of you need to have a screening committee because there's no way in how we can create like a fair poll that is for good for everyone, all the different DAO punks and goals and where they're at in life and all of that. So I do think that it'd be a lot of work, but no, I think we can go either way, which is also kind of why I want to put why we put this together so that we can get like, hey, what do you guys want? Because we don't. This is still very. We want it to be collaborative since we will be working with everyone throughout the process. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to that right now. I'd
Yeah.
love
Okay,
your
so
thoughts.
Michael, you thought that it did include onboarding all the like up to the point where they're here. Stubbs, it sounds like you didn't think that, but think that's important. Is that right?
Uh, well, so I thought that it was part of it
Okay,
because
what? Okay.
that's kind of what I'd gotten from my conversation with Crypto Bushi, but I could very much understand how, if it's not all three of us running the 12-week program, how the people, whoever is running it, would be like, if I'm running it, I should be able to go through this screening process and, that influence. So um, I was planning on doing it, but I could see why we wouldn't do it that way.
Okay,
I
Garrett.
would add that we would need some more diversity. Like it shouldn't be, the screening committee should not be limited to just the three of us dudes. Like
Of course.
I
Oh,
think, yeah,
it
we
can't
need
be,
more
and
input. And so it'd either be, maybe some other folks want to volunteer for the screening committee, or there can be some small additional remuneration for some additional people on the screening committee.
I mean,
Go
in my
ahead,
mind,
Garrett.
it was always going to be the grants committee that was doing the screening, right? Or the grants committee. So now I'm talking like you, Stubbs. The grants working group that was going to do the screening, right? And whoever wanted to join that to do the screening would go ahead and do that. And then you guys would, the three of you, in my mind, are kind of like, the champions, the leaders, the whatever of, the grants committee. And now you're being compensated for that. And part of your job as leaders of the grants committee is to get the framework dialed in, right? The playbook. Garrett, what was your thought?
Well, I'll just say plainly that no, I did not think originally that's what Bushi was, and you too here at first, because I originally thought that if you wanted us to be also do the screening committee, you know, maybe not say it by name, but I don't remember that coming up originally in our discussion, over the last two meetings. Um, that we'd be screening and selecting the applicants. I just don't remember that coming up. It might have, but I just didn't think so. Doesn't mean, however, that I didn't want to be part of that committee. Just for this specific assignment, I did not think that uh, originally.
I know you're a gamer, brother. Okay, so if I can distill this and just correct me if I'm wrong. So what I'm hearing is, in the end, I mean, Garrett, assuming you're game to do this work, that Maiko, you did think that was part of it. Stubbs, you also thought it was part of it, although you understand if you're not doing the 6 weeks after that, maybe that doesn't make sense. And Garrett, you did not think it was part of it, but you are willing to do that work anyway. Uh, is that all accurate?
Because to agree with Stubbs that I do think that the screening committee would be part of, you know, from selection to actually overseeing it, and because you're deeply understanding, why you chose these grantees, and
Well, but you're not
you
choosing the
yeah,
grantees, right? I mean, you're giving the DAO, a number of people to choose from on a snapshot vote, right? I mean, you're just kind of filtering out the ones that clearly don't apply.
That's what I was
I mean,
thinking.
right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking like I can understand why maybe and I know we're just using like different wording here because we're all trying to figure out what the heck we call different things. But like if
Correct.
we take the grants committee or the grants champions, whatever you want to call them, I would think they would probably be in the best place, in my personal opinion, to make a decision on the first cohort because they are the ones who kind of like, as they were building out the program, they were kind of building around their ideal candidates. And so I think it would be, and to be honest, I really don't think we're going to have like this ridiculous influx of like applicants in this first go. Like it's probably not going to be like that many applications. And so I was kind of thinking in my mind that maybe you guys would put together kind of like a handful of ones that kind of meet the criteria that you guys had laid out. And then the DAO as a whole kind of makes a decision together, like, oh, here's the ones we actually want to go with.
Yeah, I think
okay,
that's the way I envisioned it too. I mean, so let's get. I mean, I also think like we really need to do a good job on cohort 0, right? Like you can kind of like soft play cohort 3 a bit, right? Because you know what you're doing, but like cohort 0 needs um, it's going to need a little more hand holding to get it if we want it to be the best it can be. So like, I'll just say it like, I would like you guys to be here for the full 12 weeks. Period. I'm curious what it would cost to do that, and how we pay for it.
Well,
But
let's think about this too. I mean, as you guys are building the framework out, I think another question you guys should ask yourself is like, I mean, there are like one whole industry is hiring, and part of the way that these hiring companies make money is by making a commission on the end salary of a person. And DAOs are doing the very same thing.
Mhm.
They're offering remuneration in terms of like their native governance token. And so, there are potential strategic partnerships that we can make. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it in cohort 0, but it is a possibility. And so there is a chance that like, we could make some strategic partnerships with some DAOs, send people their way for certain things, maybe like a certain period of time or whatever, and the cohort person gets like a certain amount of kind of guaranteed income for the level of work they need. And then maybe the DAO pays us back, a percentage of their salary or whatever you want to call it in their governance token. And then that governance token could be used for remuneration. So, I mean, these are kind of things that I would think about too.
Hmm. For sure. And that
That
kind of
makes
goes
sense.
in line
Totally.
Yeah.
with, I think, at some point we're going to have DAOs sponsoring grantees, right? Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, different.
I guess my main thing was uh, just because I have experience with interviewing lots of candidates for different companies, that I do see it as a large undertaking. And I was probably overestimating that in my mind. Um, but just for my personal prediction, I'm thinking that if we design a solid application that, let's say if we do get maybe 50 applicants, I think if our application is designed well, we could probably rule out 25 right off the bat. Um, maybe between discussion, the rest, between the three of us, maybe rule out another 5 or 10 like right away. Um, and then at that point, I thought it would definitely require us to further dig in. But instead of that, like you're saying, once we narrow it down to just a smaller group of applicants, that's when we just open it up, um, to the DAO to step in. Is that what you're envisioning?
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm envisioning is kind of like a, I guess, silver platter of ideal candidates. And then the DAO kind of takes over from there, and whatever, the playbook says to do on how that next step works for the DAO, then we can kind of deploy that next step and vote however way that makes the most sense, I guess, logistically.
Mhm.
'Cause let me put it this way: when I was imagining myself, as I was sure that I was going to apply to be part of the screening committee. When I was imagining that role, um, I was at least imagining that because this is cohort 0, and I would want to make every effort to make sure we're selecting people that are, we're setting up for success and etc. But that I'd like to maybe engage in some personal conversations with candidates, maybe when we're still at that 20 or 30 applicants level. Just, hey, let me shoot you a few clarification questions, or do you want to elaborate on this? And maybe even whatever the case is, just having some more open, kind of like, in the interview process when you have that first phone call interview, where it's more than your resume, but it's not a full interview. It's just kind of like that screening process to, give us a taste. That's how I imagine the screening committee in my mind is kind of like that first phone interview where I get to ask some questions on your application, you get to clarify, and then we boil it down from there. Um, so I just envision that to be, a pretty big chunk of work if we're going to be thorough.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I honestly haven't even thought that far, to be honest. So I can totally understand. Um,
Yeah. And like I've run a grant program, and if we really want to get quality applications and stuff, we're gonna have to be doing all the engagement after they apply. Also, there's going to be a ton of there can be a lot of those same discussions while they're applying. So they're like, hey, can I talk to you about my application a little bit? Um, and so the the reason why I wouldn't necessarily say this is the 12-week program is like, for example, the newsletter. how many hours and how many people have worked on ideation and everything for the newsletter so far, and we don't have one yet. Because all of this stuff, like in theory, is quick, but then you're like, we're just getting, we're an hour in with this meeting, and it's not like we haven't created any forms, we haven't created any new documents, anything like that. That'll all have to happen afterward. So I think that if we want to have a good, robust grants program, it will be it's going to be pretty time intensive and energy and thought intensive. And it's like, well, we're planning on doing this for free until you guys said let's move along more quickly. So I'll definitely be here after, whether it's a 6-week program or the whole 12 weeks. But I do think that if we think this won't be still quite difficult, I think we're really, really underestimating the quality and how much we really want to do with this program, or we're really selling ourselves short for what we think cohort 0 can and will be.
Yeah, I completely understand. I mean, everything is always a hell of a lot harder than you ever imagined. So, and it's just like with everything in life, the most simple things, it takes you so much longer than you thought. So I
Yeah,
totally get that.
I think that the filtering process, the screening process, there's going to be a lot of subtleties and nuance to that, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion that goes into how to do that in the most fair way possible, and that's going to be a lot of the effort that we put in as this group of builders. I mean, and just to like comment on some of the direct questions that were being asked about like compensation and the amount is like, for me, I'm just like roughly figuring my rate from doing carpentry. Like if I were to be doing equivalent hours in carpentry, like what would I expect? And for me, like this amount is like, it's enough to kind of feel like I'm receiving like a reciprocal gratuity for the work that I'm putting in, but it's not like, I'm not like coming out of this being like, sweet, I'm like super excited about this job that I have. You know what I mean? It's work that I'm already doing, and when the compensation is there, it makes me willing to like commit to getting a job complete in a quality way, and it makes me feel like my work is appreciated. So I want to put in more work for that reason. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I think like it's going to take a lot of work. What we're going to
One,
do. So
I, I I think the big reason that we need to define whether it's going to be a 6-week or 12-week one, is so I worked at a startup, and I had a lot of my compensation was bonuses and stuff like that, and getting in there afraid, like basically within a month, realized that everything needed to change significantly. So we had to rework everything, but then I didn't technically hit my milestones and stuff because they were no longer valid. And so it was off the table. And you're like, well, so I don't want it to turn into one of those things where, because a lot of the cool stuff that we would do in this program does need the community to be helping out, like the newsletter, that really needs to be, or the podcast will need to get help from the rest of the community. If they don't follow through, then potentially it could look like a major failure on our part. Um, and I don't want there to be like either us feeling like, oh man, at the end of the day, we feel like we put in 100 times the work that we were expected to. But I also don't want you like it to feel like you didn't get enough um, out of what you were expecting. So I don't want there to be in 6 weeks and then again 12 weeks that like conversation of like, well, did we actually do what was expected, and have that fight at the end? I don't really think it'd be a fight, but it definitely can make hard feelings and sour
Like if the goalposts
morale.
change in real time, like what happened in your program at the end of it, if we make it too specific or even too broad, I guess it could happen either way. But it just seems like the 12 weeks was more than I originally understood for that reason that there's so many things we don't even know might happen once we open the doors for applicants. And I personally, like I said, I love the interview process. I love digging into people's psyches and all that. And I think that is enough for a single position itself and managing that throughout the process of cohort zero. But at the bottom line is I'm going to be helping building no matter what. It's just a matter of, as far as the payment goes, can I justify taking time from my other income earning activities to focus and devote a specific amount of time for this? So personally, I'm more in favor of the 6 week, and then have like an opportunity for other people to step in, have an opportunity to say, you know what, I think we designed this so well that we can handle it, just the three of us. Or maybe I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we get 100 applicants or more. And then we have the opportunity at the 6 week endpoint to say, okay, I think we actually do need some more people. Or maybe just the community can handle it. But at least in my mind, from our original discussion, it was the 6 week. Here's the deliverables, the documents, the framework, all that type of thing.
Okay. To be mindful of time and all those lovely things, and so, okay, so there was some confusion about well, it sounds like you guys were clear, and maybe CB and I were a bit confused about whether you're going to see it through all the way. I think we cleared that up. It sounds like maybe there's still some uncertainty about whether you onboard cohort zero, although Garrett, it sounds like maybe you're okay with that, and that Stubbs and Maiko this whole time thought that was part of the deal. I think that maybe the next step practically, because I'll be honest with you, and I mean, obviously CB and Sinjin and I got to chat, but I mean, I'll, in my mind, like, I would prefer if you guys ran, or one of you at least, if it's only a one-person job, if that's what you think it is. Although I think you can spread less work over more people. Want to bring it through to 12 weeks. So why don't you guys talk about that amongst yourselves? So you, Garrett, and Maiko and Stubbs, and then me and CB and Sinjin will chat about these kind of things on our end when we have our core team meeting next week. And then we'll get back here next Thursday and talk about week 6 through 12 and what we feel about that. And in the meantime, it sounds like we're at least on the same page for the first 6 weeks, right? And so,
Yeah, I would say we could start on that.
Yeah, so get building on that. We'll get you the first half of the payment out, right? Because I think if I read the proposal correctly, you're good about getting half now and half upon deliverable, which sounds like deliverable again is cohort zero. But I do want you guys to bring like a screening group on board besides the three of you. I think I actually tend to be more of the mind that there's going to be more than 10 or 15 folks who want this. I can think of like 7 or 8 offhand who I know are going to apply for sure, and that's only ones who have DM'd me and saying, when can I apply? Now whether they follow through, different story. But I would be thoughtful or mindful of maybe trying to rope in some kind of people to decentralize this process a bit, because really but it's your guys's framework, it's your choice, and if you think you'll do a better job, the three of you, like, I get that. And then we'll meet back up, same time, same place next week, and see if we'll talk about week 6 through 12. How does that sound?
Yeah. And I want to say too, like, anybody that's ever worked with me, I think they would always say that I've always tried to make sure that everybody is happy and compensated. So
Yep.
I do not like to take free work from anybody, because I don't expect to give free work to anybody either. And so I always try to go out of my way and make sure that people are happy and satisfied. And so I guess, I don't know, take that for what that's worth.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Thank you, Bushi.
I wouldn't have said the
Definitely
same
get
thing
that
2 months
vibe.
ago, but now like I'm all on board with you, bro. You changed my mind too. Like this is like growth and learning. It's so beautiful. So all right, guys, go start to work and we'll get you some dough. And do we have all of your ETH addresses?
I'm actually just. Why don't you guys just drop it in the other champions chat, and then we'll get that transaction sent out to you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
Yep.
And we were talking about, we want to like drop this proposal to the community, just to like make everyone aware of everything that's going on. And I was imagining sort of preempting that with this BIDL proposal model in general, to say like, hey, this isn't like an exclusive in-group situation. It's like a thing that anyone can do. And if any group of people are trying to get work done, they can write up one of these BIDL proposals and submit it, and maybe get paid for some specific work that needs to get done as well. Does that sound like a good idea to folks?
Why don't we think about that? I mean, is the question, can like the newsletter team drop a proposal to ask for some money using the same framework that you're talking about?
Basically.
I mean, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think I see him as pretty different. I mean, I don't know. I would be way more skeptical of giving money like for the podcast that I'm involved in or the newsletter folks, and under the same framework. I mean, just because, guys, what you're doing is like the core mission of the DAO, right? And like the newsletter and the podcast and whatever else we spin up, whether it's a jobs board, is sort of, it's pretty ancillary and it should be bootstrapped. I mean,
Well, they
in
can
my mind.
monetize. They
just
can
for
monetize different ways.
yeah, just so you guys know, the reason why that conversation came up was not for something like the newsletter. It's more for pushing forward the treasury and governance stuff. Just because I know that kind of since Hero and I stepped back, and it's Micah who's been doing a lot of it. Just ways to potentially push that forward as well, so that we would have like all the frameworks of the DAO. And that's where that conversation came from first, not necessarily for like newsletter and podcast types.
it's also just
Understood.
to generate a more inclusive sense of like what's going on here, right? Like kind of trying to keep things out in the open and transparent. And because we had a meeting between the three of us, and we were like, okay, how do we want to do this here? And it seemed like there was some pretty strong sentiment to make this proposal publicly to the community, and not just to the core team.
Well, I think we should drop your proposal. But I mean, in regards to the other stuff, I think there's no need to like talk about like other future proposals and stuff. I kind of come from the mindset of like, if you want something, then learn to ask for it. And so I would rather other people, I mean, you're leading already by example here with this. So, I mean, I don't think we have to like open the door and tell people exactly like, oh, you need to put together the proposals. I mean, again, you guys started by doing all of this from passion and you didn't come with your hand out. And I think that that's truly how good stuff is built. And so I'm more just concerned that like once you open the door of like, oh, maybe you can get money for a proposal, that we're gonna have people stepping up, kind of it coming from a different place rather than building out of passion first and then abundance comes next. Do you know what I mean?
Like inviting the mercenaries, sort of thing.
Exactly. So I think we can be out in the open. And to be honest, guys, too, I wouldn't be too concerned about the treasury framework and the other stuff. To be 100% honest, I think a lot of people are changing their view on what a DAO is and how a DAO is ran. I've already kind of seen this happening between a lot of people who um, have been running DAOs over the last year. And so I think, going slow is okay in my opinion, because nobody knows what the hell they're doing anyways. And so there's no reason to rush stuff. Like it'll happen when it needs to happen. And right now, I think the way stuff is happening is good for now. So like the pressure
And
will naturally happen.
and the only thing that like needs to happen is the grants.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like that's the core mission. So and
Right.
guys, I mean, it's not like we have some fat treasury, right? And so yeah, keep it focused. I mean, we have a grants. I mean, we have the government's framework, or excuse me, Michael, the interim governance framework. Approved. Right now, is it ideal? No, but I mean, it works, right? And the treasury management framework. I mean, I don't I don't know of any. I don't even think Bankless, I mean, has one, that's snapshotted. Um, so I do think that that's something that would be cool to get done, right? But it's not mission critical at all. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I want the treasury diversified. I wish we would have diversified half of it or 70% into stables, 2 months ago, right? But we can still do that anyway. I actually, in some ways, would like to get the treasury snapshot kind of up and done. But I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, I think governance is. We'll keep poking at it, right? I mean, whoever can show up on Fridays with me and Maiko and CB and whoever else can show up, great, right? And you're normally there, Garrett. Awesome. We'll keep on plugging away at it, and at some point before too long, we'll have that done. And it might be good to reactivate the Treasury framework because I would like to see that diversified away from all ETH, but I say that now, but if ETH goes to 6,000 next month, I'll be like, shit. Well, God, and too bad we could get it in stables. So anyway, yeah.
Well, we'll drop
So what is
we'll
the
drop
point?
the build proposal in there in
Yeah,
the
drop
announcement.
the proposal.
We'll let everybody know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So
Cool.
I guess that's a long-winded way of saying go for it, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Yeah,
I
I
don't know.
think there's just
Makes
something
sense.
something that's missing from our kind of structure is like the shared equity in the future potential of the project, because we don't. I mean, I guess you have like the NFT itself and the the potential for that value to grow, but other than that, it's like we have a lot of opportunity for what this can be for the future, and we don't have any clear way to represent like shared equity for those of us who are contributing to like building that whole thing out. Unless you're a part of the core team, then you benefit from like the future potential, of any opportunities, So I don't know, that's just a thought. Obviously too much to discuss right now, but
Well, but I'm a little curious what you mean, though. I mean, how does that all, how does any upside only attribute to the core team?
well, it'd be like upside would attribute to people who are like shareholders, and not like of so as like a worker-owned co-op or something like that. You know what I mean? So we're contributing to this project. If we owned equity share in the project, then you can continue to put in work, knowing that the work that you're putting in can benefit you in the future, because the better thing that you build, the better thing that you own. But because we don't actually own it, and it is just like a centralized treasury, it's kind of like, um, you know, I think if there was a shared equity, then the need for like a direct compensation would be like less necessary. Um, but because you don't
Just 'cause I'm
have,
curious. I mean, when you say just because I'm really curious, Michael, because I'm not
yeah.
quite sure what you mean. So, like, when you say shared equity, I mean, what does that look like to you? And then we got to get out of here. I know, but
Yeah.
like,
Oh, that would look
I mean,
like,
what?
well, for a
Well,
DAO,
like,
it would
what do
look
you
like a
mean
governance token,
exactly?
right? For a DAO, it would look like
Right. That's what I thought.
a team
Yeah.
allocation of like the mint of the governance token, right? But we didn't do that, so we don't really have that opportunity. We have the NFTs, so it's a little bit different. We have a little lower fidelity with that. So then we don't really have the same kind of shared equity opportunity that we would if we had a governance token, or if we were like a company with equity shares. So it's like, how do we be creative and offer that to
Yeah, yeah. I
contributors?
mean, essentially, the token that you'd pay out for, like, we would pay for this work in our governance token normally, or something, right? If we were that kind of DAO that had a token.
Right, which may or may
I,
not
I
have any
think
value, but it represents the future potential of like growing this thing into something that can be valuable.
Is the appreciation of the NFT not that though? I mean, I'm not trying to argue with you. I mean, I think that I mean I understand what you're saying that they're not the same, and they're not the same, right? Because it's not like we're continually like paying people in new NFTs, right? Um,
It is, but it's just a lot lower fidelity. Like I bought my NFT
okay.
with my own money, and that's totally separate from whether or not I'm contributing to the project. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't underestimate social equity though. Like for instance, what if this program takes off and you guys get picked out of the crop and get offered some wonderful careers that are very high paying in the DAO space to do similar type work. To me, that's just as valuable, or if not more valuable, than any sort of governance token. Like, to be honest, I've always looked at bank tokens and bankless DAO as somewhat worthless in my opinion. I'm purely involved just for the social equity.
Yeah, I think that part of the problem, well, I don't know, maybe I only see it as a problem, is kind of what Hero and I ran into each other with, like at the beginning here, a lot, where it's like centralization versus decentralization versus hierarchy and all of that. I from from a lot of the conversations, at least in the discords and public discords and stuff, I mean, I feel like I've made it pretty clear that like I think some sort of hierarchy, some sort of centralization and everything is necessary so that we can get things like this done. I think it's not anti DAO to have it either. But I mean, there are a lot of people that are very DAO means anyone. DAO, like, I see it as kind of a country club, the social connections and everything. Whereas a lot of people are like, hey, if I'm in a DAO, I own the DAO. And if the DAO makes money, I should make money and be able to make decisions. Um, just because of the space and how like a lot of the stuff was very much, especially the last couple of months, very much like, hey, if there's any centralization to a DAO, it's not a DAO. Or, you know, the DAO wants this, and so the core team, it doesn't matter that they don't want it, we should do it. And I don't know if I don't think we've ever had really that conversation explicitly that separates like, you know, the thoughts of you guys, because like to me, I mean, we had this conversation where I was like, hey, if they want to make a unilateral decision, like CB did this art, and he didn't have to have any of the mint go to the DAO. When you did the partnership, not all of the money had to go, or any money needed to go to the DAO, but you decided to do it anyway. Um, so it's almost like now that it's maturing a little bit, and there's a community and people who are really personally invested, like and emotionally invested in this art and the community and what the DAO is. Um, it's almost like there needs to be a explicit type of, hey, here's we don't necessarily say we have to turn over the treasury to the DAO's will initially, or some things like that. I think that that's where some of the, you know, not getting value versus the core team, where those thoughts come from. But I may be just putting words in other people's mouths.
Yeah, no, I can get it. I think like I said earlier, I think everyone's trying to figure out like what the hell a DAO is, right? And so I think, you know, there's definitely been I've seen the sentiment change a lot over the last couple weeks, especially. And so
Yep.
I'm trying to figure that out too. So yeah, I don't disagree, but I don't know what the answer is either. So
Um, Sometime in the future, you know, maybe it's on one of the podcasts or newsletters or whatever. Um, you might want to think about like kind of addressing that thought, because I mean, and again, maybe I read into it because I'm kind of the thought that DAOs don't necessarily mean there's no hierarchy, and I'm not all about decentralization. Um, but especially since we do have a core team that is, it's like it's explicit, but it's kind of, I know a lot of new people are like, what? There's a core team? I didn't realize that they can, you know what I mean? So it's almost like you need a community update, but that, I know that would cause a lot of controversy no matter what you
I
say.
mean,
But
that's like what the governance framework is for, right? So that somebody can look at that framework and say like, okay, this is exactly how this organization functions. And it's like, it's funny because I wrote up our current governance framework that we're working on, and like, I didn't even include the slightest hint of a core team in there, when in my mind, I'm sitting here and I'm trying to type out exactly how this organization functions. And then like over the past couple of weeks or three or however many, I've been realizing like, oh, like this whole organization is run by a core team right now. Like, right, because we haven't actually solved all this stuff yet. And obviously that needs to be in our governance framework, because that is what this organization is. Like that's what's functioning, and there's no need to be ashamed of that. It just everything needs to be totally transparent and made clear so that everybody knows what they're getting into.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I think as we go
Yeah,
through
like
this process and we learn, we'll just have to continue to pivot and try and get people to understand what's going on. I mean, I would be under the mindset that like I would think it would be almost foolish if people did not think there was a core team because it's like, nothing runs itself. And so but I can understand that, we'll probably have to have a conversation one
But
day and
that's the
try to
fantasy.
make people understand.
That's the fantasy of a DAO, and that's what so many people get into it for, is like the fantasy. So then they're like, oh wow, this magical, like it just runs by itself and it's so amazing. We don't need companies anymore. We don't need corporations or governments. We'll just do this because look, it's working so well.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And just to simplify it, and I think this is a governance discussion, but just to simply state this is how it is, not a statement of what we will be or what we're working towards, but this is how it is, and this is what we're working towards. Whereas I could see where Stubbs and Micah are just saying that right now the governance framework has solely been focused on what we're working towards. Um, Without just explicitly stating the chain of command or whatever is necessary to actually make decisions or move treasury funds or use the name or likeness of the DAO or anything like that, because there's definitely that like you said, that kind of magical imagery out there about these. I mean, it's in the name, it's autonomous, it just kind of runs itself and is its own being, but we're not there yet. And that's cool. We're all just discovering how the hell to get there. I'm fine with that. I
Yeah,
was
exactly.
under no delusion. I knew there had to be someone with the keys to the the multi-sig. I looked at the multi-sig on day 2 or 3 or whenever you guys posted it. Like, but not everyone thinks that way.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, theoretically, there are human elements involved here that I guess theoretically we could rug, but there would be no situation that we would actually do that, and I don't think we would all ever agree on the multi-sig to do that, anyways. I mean, we're all in this to see this through and see this vision through. To be honest, we're doxxed anyways, so there's absolutely no advantage for us to kind of walk away from this. So we're invested and we are by no means, I mean, we're cash flow negative in terms of us personally, so I think that right there proves like our intentions. And so
Yeah.
we're just
We
gotta
just
just
wanted to make it public that that is the case, that you guys already have gone, through great lengths to even make it possible to be where we are now. As I didn't know that until our recent discussion. That just made me trust you guys even more, understanding that you are personally invested and, like you said, in that negative currently, like it did build trust with me. And I just wasn't aware of it until a week or 2 ago.
We're doxed and negative, like we are anti-crypto all the way. This is very interesting. Guys, I gotta run. I look forward to governance tomorrow, and I look forward to grants next week. And if you guys could think deeply, sort of about what in your mind, what week 6 to 12 looks like for you, we can have a discussion about that. In the meantime, kick her off and get going. We'll get you some dough tomorrow, and go from there.
perfect.
All right.
Thank you guys.
All right.
Work.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
guys.
All right, guys.
Love you guys, and
Cheers, guys.
yeah, thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you guys. Looking forward
Absolutely.
I
to it.
got you for sure.
See ya.
Cheers, friends.